All right, let's dive right into this explainer and completely transform how you handle that frustrating heavy clay soil in your garden. If you've ever felt like you're quite literally trying to farm a parking lot, you are in exactly the right place. Over the next few minutes, we're going to break down the exact step-by-step science and strategies to turn that stubborn dirt into rich, breathable, highly productive loam, even if you're tackling this for the very first time.
But first, we've got to address a massive elephant in the room. You know the feeling? You push a shovel into your dirt, the blade just drags, or maybe the ground dries into this cracked, impenetrable crust after a summer rain. When that happens, you might be tempted to reach for the most common and, honestly, most disastrous piece of gardening advice on the internet. And that advice? Just add a little bit of sand.
While this perfectly captures why adding sand to clay is a total garden myth that absolutely ruins your soil drainage and leaves you with an impenetrable brick. Think about how actual concrete is made, right? It's an aggregate, like sand or gravel, bound together by a really fine cement paste. When you add coarse sand to superfine clay, you are literally just making weak concrete. Unless you can replace over 50% of your soil volume with sand, which, by the way, would take dozens of truckloads for an average yard, you're really just making the compaction so much worse.
So stick around, because this explainer is essentially your masterclass to fixing that soil problem for good. We're going to cover understanding clay and the sand myth, organic amendments, the science of gypsum, aeration tools and cover crops, our step-by-step action plan, and finally, long-term maintenance.
Section 1. Understanding clay and the sand myth. Why your soil fights back.
Let's actually zoom in and look at what clay is on a microscopic level. Once we understand why it fights us, we can figure out how to work with it instead of constantly battling it. And the most interesting thing to realize here, clay isn't inherently bad. Actually, it has a really high cationic exchange capacity, or CEC, which basically means it holds onto water and nutrients incredibly well. The real issue is structural. Because these microscopic particles are shaped like tiny flat plates, they pack together insanely tight. That means there's virtually no pore space for oxygen, water drainage, or root expansion, so your plants literally just suffocate and stall out. Picture sand as large, rounded boulders, and clay as those tiny, flat plates we just talked about. Mixing them together just fills the gaps with cement. But looking at the other approach, we see the real fix: organic matter. Organic matter acts just like a sponge. It physically wedges itself between those flat clay plates and pries them apart, creating those absolutely crucial air pockets that your plant roots are desperate for.
Section 2. Organic amendments. The true heroes of soil building.
So the takeaway here is that we absolutely must ditch the sand strategy and bring in the heavy hitters, organic amendments. This is exactly how we introduce that spongy, life-giving structure back into the earth. Compost and well-decomposed manure are absolutely going to be your best friends here. Biochar is also fantastic because its highly porous structure acts as a permanent microscopic sponge. But hey, let me give you a massive troubleshooting tip right here. Pay really close attention to this last one. Never, ever mix raw, fresh wood chips directly into your clay soil, because the soil is already starved for oxygen. The microbes that break down those fresh chips will pull whatever nitrogen and oxygen is left right out of the ground, completely stalling your plants. Always, always keep fresh chips strictly on the surface as a mulch.
Section 3. The science of gypsum. Microscopic soil engineering.
Now, beyond organic matter, there's this incredible, almost pro-level secret to breaking up heavy, high-sodium clay soils, and you don't even have to lift a shovel. It's literally chemistry. This is the magic of gypsum, which triggers a chemical process called flocculation. See, because of natural negative charges, when clay is heavily dominated by sodium, the particles repel each other and lay totally flat. That's what causes that awful waterlogged pooling you see after a heavy rain. But gypsum introduces calcium, which kicks out the sodium and causes those tiny particles to finally stop repelling each other and clump together into larger, stable aggregates. It acts as a microscopic soil engineer, binding particles so water and air can actually flow through the soil.
You know, a super common misconception is that gypsum works just like agricultural lime. It definitely doesn't. Gypsum will not change your soil's pH level at all, but it chemically restructures the dirt itself. It works absolute wonders on sodic or high-sodium clay soils. So if your yard crusts over super hard after a rain and sheds water like pavement, gypsum is an incredible tool to pair with your compost to finally get that water moving downward again.
Section 4.
aeration tools, and cover crops, breaking the hardpan.
Of course, chemistry and biology take a little bit of time, right? So you'll need a few essential tools to physically open up the earth today without destroying its fragile structure in the process. The absolute standout tool here is the broad fork. You just step on it, sink the tines deep into the clay, and pull back slightly. It cracks and lifts the soil without flipping it over. These kinds of tools help you avoid the destructive pulverization that comes from heavy rototilling. Seriously, when you aggressively rototill clay, you destroy whatever aggregate structure it had, and after the very first rain, it just settles right back into an even harder cement layer.
But hey, if you don't want to break your back digging, just let nature do the work for you. Planting cover crops, like the massive daikon radish, is literally like deploying a subterranean army to fracture the clay from the inside out. When that radish dies and rots away over the winter, it leaves behind this massive vertical channel for water and air to penetrate deep down into the hardpan. It's amazing.
Section 5. The step-by-step action plan. Transforming your garden this weekend. Okay, so how do we actually put all this together? Let's synthesize everything into a practical, step-by-step masterclass you can take out to the garden this weekend. If you remember nothing else, please remember step 1, the squeeze test. Take a handful of your clay and squeeze it. If it forms a shiny, sticky ball that doesn't easily break apart when you poke it, walk away. If you till or walk heavily on wet clay, you'll completely destroy its structure and cause severe long-term waterlogging. So wait for it to dry out a bit, broad fork it to let it breathe, lay your compost and gypsum on top, and then protect the whole shebang with a nice thick layer of wood chip mulch.
Section 6. Long-term maintenance. Soil building is a marathon.
All right, you've done the heavy lifting of getting the process started, but maintaining that beautiful new loam is all about the long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. If you take away one maintenance tip, let it be this: transitioning to a no-till system. Maybe even utilizing raised beds right on top of the clay. This ensures that all the organic matter you're adding stays layered and highly functional, rather than just getting churned into a muddy mess every spring. Remember, clay actually makes a fantastic subsoil because it holds on to water during droughts. So by simply laying compost on top year after year, you build a beautiful loamy topsoil while still utilizing the clay base below for its incredible moisture-retaining superpowers.
So, what does this timeline actually look like? Well, it's not an overnight fix, no way. But if you follow this structured approach, by year 3, your once concrete yard is going to be a friable, nutrient-dense oasis that drains beautifully. Your plant roots will plunge deep into the earth, and honestly, you will barely need to lift a shovel again.
Now, real quick before we wrap up, a quick disclaimer. Soil compositions vary wildly from region to region. This information is for educational purposes, so checking with a local ag extension or a soil testing lab is always a smart move before you go out and buy amendments like gypsum or compost in bulk. They can tell you exactly what your specific sodium and pH levels are.
So, now that you've unlocked the incredible hidden potential of your clay soil and you know exactly how to avoid that deadly sand myth, the only question left to ask is, what are you going to plant in it? Thanks for learning with me today. Keep building that soil, and I'll see you in the next explainer.